Get your fill of Phil now, while you still can. It'd be funny if this is... Ladies and gentlemen, everyone out there in HuffPost livestream land, the GOP debate is now over. I don't know where to begin, but we are North American scum. Joining me is senior political economy reporter Zach Carter and the editor of the morning email, Lauren Weber. And tonight, we have some assurance will be the last GOP debate of this year. There will be many, many more next year because God is angry at us.
There were still 9 people on the stage tonight.
There's still 9 people
and
on the
there's
stage
still
tonight.
an undercard debate, just in case you didn't know.
Yes.
We still had to watch it.
Right.
So
If you're somehow watching us and you missed the last 4.5 hours, it was just 4.5 hours of like foaming at the mouth Islamophobia.
Yes, and yet
That's
it was
what happened.
somewhat...
and it was also 4.5 hours.
It was like a
It's
Samuel
long
Beckett
time.
play about Islamophobia in that we never knew when it was beginning, when it was ending, who was showing
was
up,
talking.
who was leaving, who was talking and why.
It was like
and
a haze.
periodically Ben Carson would show up to say some complete nonsense
About
airplanes and like he's falling asleep. But let's try to begin.
It's really hard for me to sum
Where
up
do
what
you
this is
even
about.
start?
I mean,
I
look,
don't-
I came into this debate thinking that this was going to be a showdown between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump because Ted Cruz has been gaining on him in Iowa.
Right.
And the main conflict here, the main source of potential interest from a horse race perspective would be who came out ahead from this debate, Ted Cruz or Donald Trump. But they both refused to attack each other.
They refused. They absolutely, they gave them many an opportunity to go after each other, and they just point blank said no.
That said, I felt like Donald Trump's last few debates have been pretty low energy, despite that being something
That's kind of a diss, man.
that he
Low
attacks
energy.
Jeb
He had
Bush
less
for all the
speaking
time.
time. He didn't,
But I thought this one was his best debate since the first one, and I thought, particularly when clearly Jeb Bush got under his skin, and when they were just having it out, it looked like Trump the bullying people, and I feel like that's something that the GOP voters respond to.
Doesn't that mean that Bush had a better debate than he normally had too?
No, because I think he lost to Trump in front of everybody again. So
I thought Bush had a better debate. I felt like he actually came up, the only way that Jeb Bush would actually have an excellent debate is if he punched Donald Trump in the face.
Yeah.
That would be great, but that would probably be the only way that he would win a debate. But I thought he actually showed up and was able to kind of go back and forth with Trump, and he didn't back down usually like he does when Trump starts to interrupt him. I mean, he still looked silly, but it was better than usual.
I think that from the perspective of maybe some nervy Jeb Bush donors tonight, perhaps there wasn't an immediate reason to continue to flee. But the question then is, who do they flee to? And the only real choice, if you're a Bush donor, is Marco Rubio. How did he fare tonight? He was, I think, in the center of a lot of onstage conflicts. Not Ted Cruz, but Marco Rubio.
Well, he got into a really serious tete-a-tete with Ted Cruz on immigration. And to be clear, Ted Cruz completely lied about his own policy, his own platform, particularly on green cards, where he said he had not supported expanding the number of green cards that we have in the United States.
Let's back up and explain this specifically, because the source of the conflict was over which one supported and to use this word as like a catch-all for Mexicans remaining in the United States under any circumstances, amnesty. And Cruz is now fronting as if he never suggested that he supported any sort of path to citizenship. But that's not right.
It's not true.
And also saying that he will not support legalization for anybody, not just citizenship, but legalization, any form of legal status for people who are currently undocumented people currently in the country. So that's a very, very extreme position on immigration. It's more extreme than most of the Republican candidates in the debate who oppose a path to citizenship. He's saying no legal status, period. But he was also, that's also at odds with his record. I mean, on his own website right now, you can go to the Ted Cruz website and see that he supports expanding the number of green cards available, right? He's saying, I want to be able to have more people in the country with that policy. More people who are currently undocumented getting those green cards, more H-1B visas. He completely misrepresented his own record here, and yet I felt like he totally owned Marco Rubio in that exchange in terms of just straight up primate dominance ritual stuff. He had Marco on his heels.
The new GOP insult is if you're buds with Chuck Schumer, you're really just dead in the water. I mean, that's it. You might as well just.
I do wonder.
Sayonara.
I do wonder how many GOP primary voters actually know who Chuck Schumer is.
That's a good question, but still, that seemed to be the insult of the night. That was the new bar.
And I felt like so to me that was the area which if I was looking at this as a contest between Cruz and Trump, that was the area where I felt like Cruz gained the most ground on Trump, not going after Trump himself, but going after Rubio and looking good in that exchange with Rubio, even though he lied. Which we're in a fact-free zone now with this debate. If we get into the foreign policy details of this debate, it's going to get really crazy really fast. Chris Christie basically said he was cool with declaring war on Russia tonight.
Oh yeah,
which was bonkers.
That was great. World War III.
There was so much madness tonight. I think
it's hard because it's such a haze. It's hard to pick out pieces of it.
We have to talk a little bit about Chris Christie, and I suppose we'll start chewing our way up through the muck and the mire. We'll begin with the undercard debate, a thing I no longer support having. Unless
No longer?
I no longer support having an undercard debate unless the plan is to now forever send Rick Santorum, Mike Huckabee, George Pataki, and Lindsey Graham from place to place pretending there's still a debate on. If we can condemn those four men to perpetual undercard debating forever, I would support that. But I no longer need to see it on my TV. Was there anything worth the undercard debate even happening tonight? I can think of maybe one thing. I bet you think the same thing, so go.
So my view in the undercard debate here is that it was even more foaming at the mouth Islamophobic than the main
Huckabee's comments were horrendous.
debate. Huckabee and Santorum both pretty much said that Islam is a bad religion. Santorum said that there's something different about Islam. They have a law. Well, there are laws in a lot of religions. That's not unique to Islam. He was just feeding foaming at the mouth racists there. And Huckabee said terrible things. Just absolutely terrible things. And so you have Lindsey Graham on stage, who is a person who supports basically anytime you're presented with a foreign policy problem, Lindsey Graham supports dropping bombs and, if necessary, sending American troops. He was on stage saying that he wants to send 20,000 American troops to Iraq and Syria, split between Iraq and Syria. Then he's going to get Turkey to send a whole lot more people, and that's going to kill ISIS. Okay, we had 150,000 troops on the ground during the surge, all right? And to the extent that the surge worked, it did work because we had other allies who were politically invested in the Iraqi fight.
We had proxy groups on the ground in Iraq.
The idea that we are going to kill ISIS, destroy ISIS, and bring stability to the Middle East with 20,000 troops and an extremely reluctant ally who is, it's not like Barack Obama hasn't been trying to get Turkey involved, right? That's absurd. It is a total fantasy plan, and Lindsey Graham was by far the most reasonable, well-reasoned candidate on the stage. It was just I could not believe that I was watching this happen in the presidential election.
He's the one that said, I support my Muslim troops. In the middle of Huckabee saying all these horrible racist things. Graham was the only person to stand up and say we need to work with our friends in Islam, and then followed it up by saying we should bomb them to hell and back. But,
right, yeah.
But it was better than some of the other ones.
So we're all then agreed that was my thing too. The rare occasions where Lindsey Graham was the voice of reason
and then
against
said, kill them
Islamophobia.
All. Kill them all.
I do. It is fitting that a guy who was such a stand for the surge is out there trying to remind people, hey, you need Sunni proxy groups to fight a war against ISIS. It's just science, man. You can't do it without them. And every other candidate, it seems, well, not every other candidate, but most of the other candidates seem to think that it's okay to alienate Sunni Muslims and still then say, hey, sign up and fight our ISIS battle for us.
there's a reason.
There was also, I have to say, Mike Huckabee threw in a weird admonishment of millennials during the undercard debate.
Yes.
Where he was
So
like,
weird.
you guys,
college or something.
you guys need to get up off your ass and go fight ISIS. And it's like, hey, man, that is like your generation's big cock up, not these millennials. I mean, we have this kind of like weird, let's blame millennials for their weirdness and pretend that like they're what's really wrong with America. But millennials, if you're out there, and I'm not just saying this because I want your clicks, I'm saying this because it's the truth.
But we do want your clicks.
We do want your clicks. That's
As
also
a
true.
millennial, I took offense.
But I do want you to understand, millennials, that you did not fuck this world up, okay? It was fucked up for you. And if you would like to opt out of maybe not dying because of someone else's fuck-ups, I'm not going to blame you for wanting that.
Hey, Lindsey Graham was also the only person to really call out Donald Trump for his massive Islamophobia. He did make a big stand to say that's what's driving this country apart.
Yeah.
And yet, while Lindsey Graham is correct to say that a ban on all Muslims only makes it harder for the United States to defeat ISIS, Lindsey Graham's reasonable moderate position is no Syrian refugees.
Yes, and that George Bush would never have gotten into this mess. And it was like, specifically and literally, this is the mess he specifically and literally got us into. No one else got us in here.
Well, I mean,
He was like, let's go to be in this mess.
Let's be clear. There has been some help from the Obama administration
Definitely,
along the way. I mean, the invasion of
definitely.
Libya it's not like that had nothing to do with what's gone on. I mean, and the on the ground management of the withdrawal. I mean, I think there are reasonable criticisms people can make.
be lobbied at
What we've
everybody.
done in Syria, where there's a red line, there's not a red line. Assad's got to go.
Right.
There are things that have made that worse, but none of this is possible without the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Absolutely none
absolutely
of it.
not.
And nobody who's serious about this doubts that proposition, which is why it's odd that we just had 13 people on stage for 4.5 hours saying that none of this had anything
13.
to do.
By the way, just in case you didn't hear that number, 13 people are still on
Yes,
stage.
that's another reason I would like to see the undercard debate fall by the wayside, is because at some point we have to have some winnowing.
There's got to be a winnowing. I mean, where is the winnowing? I mean,
We've lost Scott Walker.
We've been saying for some
and
time.
Rick Perry.
That's
think-
right, Rick Perry.
For the people who are
Jim Gilmore's been gone for a while.
yeah, we're out Jim
No,
Gilmore.
he's
that's
still
true.
running.
He's still running, but he's not allowed anywhere.
All right, I've got to go. I'm going to kick it to Samantha Joe right now, who's got a story for us, but we'll be right back in just a minute.
Well, I've taken you all to many watch parties across Iowa, but there's one candidate we have not been at a watch
we'll play
party
for just a
for,
minute.
and that
We'll
is
kick it back
Donald
up to
Trump. I'm here
Christy
in
Fury
a
and
restaurant
Casey.
in West Des Moines
Am I
that was
supposed to
rented
know?
out.
Since
We talked to folks here about why they're supporting Trump,
No one's told us
about
anything
those
about anything.
controversial
This
comments
isn't
that
gonna
he's
roll
made most
forever.
recently,
Okay,
and
got
everything
it.
else
I was like,
between.
Humpty Trumpty is going to put this country back
Yeah, I'm here.
together
What's
again. You know, I'm baffled by
Oh, never
people
mind. You
who
aren't getting
don't
up.
look at that as a good idea. I
Sorry.
think that for a period of time, to have a moratorium on immigration that potentially risks the lives of innocent Americans isn't a bad thing until we can figure out a better way to screen them and to keep track of them. Every terrorist act that has occurred in this country has happened with terrorists that were in this country legally. And I think people have lost sight of that.
I do agree. Jimmy Carter did this when he was president during the Iran-Contra scandal. He, for a short time before he got everything figured out, banned Iranians into the country. I think we need to figure out the problem, kind of get it under control. These people need to be screened better, and I think a lot of people agree with that. And I don't think he necessarily means ban people because of their religion, but all the jihadists are actually Muslim. That is who we are actually fighting.
Being all in the spotlight like he is, you would expect his kids to have drug problems, marital problems, and things like that. They're not like that. They're all upstanding people. Probably his daughter Ivanka is one of the most classiest ladies. I compare her to Grace Kelly, as a matter of fact. So I judge people by their family and how they navigate through life. So I had to shed all the preconceptions of he's a racist, he'll bloviates without caring about what he's saying. A lot of that it's in the editing that happens, you know. So when he said, just for a minute, I want to ban Muslims temporarily, that front part was taken off, the rear part was taken off, and it became, I want to ban Muslims, and everybody's ran with it.
Well, the first time that I decided was when I heard him talk, and he talked very truthfully. I respected that, and he was talking about things that I personally believed in, and I know that he is not against Hispanics or anybody that is of other race. He's not that way at all.
And this past weekend, the Iowa poll did come out showing that Donald Trump is now bumped to number 2, with Ted Cruz now leading the field here in Iowa. And I talked to folks here, none of them seem very concerned about this, many of them calling it a phase. In West Des Moines, Samantha Jo Roth reporting.
So where do we begin when we want to talk about the state of the Republican Party?
The Romneys were such great, decent, thoughtful people. I think everybody who worked on a campaign or was around that campaign appreciated that they were thinkers and lovers and kind people. And we've come so far from that. And I don't think anybody would have predicted we would be where we are today. But
That true?
I don't know about that. I mean, this is not a slam on Republicans necessarily, but if you look at who the Republicans have nominated post-Reagan, I mean, George H.W. Bush, one term, Dole flamed out spectacularly. George W. Bush, who did, survive 2 terms, but ran as a conservative, added new cabinet agencies, vastly expanded the federal budget and other things like that. And then John McCain, and then Romney. At some point, voters really wanted something that was more definitively conservative, and that's not a dig on the individual candidates necessarily. I mean, I agree Romney would have been certainly a better president than Obama by light years, but at some point, the establishment was much less conservative than the base, and it just caught up with it.
If you look at 2012, for a pretty good chunk of the primary, Mitt was sitting, somewhere in the late teens, mid-20s, which means that about 75% of the party was saying they wanted Bachmann, Teepaw, Perry, Kane, Gingrich. And so there was a sense back then that the primary electorate was much more conservative than where Mitt was. Ultimately, they came together when it came down to a couple of candidates. The decision was made that they wanted somebody that was conservative enough, they thought could be competitive, they thought could raise money, they thought wouldn't embarrass the party. That's where they fell down. I don't know that we know yet whether or not the party's going to end up there.
There are lines to be drawn from 2012 to 2016.
Draw them for us, Reed.
Romney. Trump in 2011, we remember the whole.
It's easy to mix those two up.
They're very similar. They both have amazing hair.
Amazing hair.
One has amazing hair.
And much richer than all of us.
Yes.
But Trump captivated a segment of the Republican populace in 2011 with the whole birther saga.
Sure.
And was important enough that Mitt Romney took a high-profile endorsement from him shortly before the Nevada caucuses at a Trump hotel in Las Vegas.
You showed up at his hotel.
How was lunch with the Donald? We didn't eat together, but we spent time together with a couple of his kids and with a couple of my colleagues. And
he showed up. They stood together. That might have been the most awkward and nervous I remember Romney looking through the whole campaign. More nervous than when he had to stand up and explain the 47% video was when he was standing arm in arm with Donald Trump at his casino.
Well, it might have been a tie with when Meatloaf came out.
It did seem like in 2011, I don't know, it seemed like a lot of them wanted to have whatever it was he was bringing to the table, but clearly recognized that this guy was a little bit off and maybe dangerous. But they didn't know how to do it. I mean, they were actively seeking his approval while simultaneously trying to not get too close.
To be clear, Mitt Romney was never seeking his approval.
Okay.
What Mitt Romney was seeking was to have Donald Trump not crap all over our campaign for the entire year. And those were the options. He was either on your team and, to some degree would be supportive. You couldn't manage him or control him in any way. But at least, in his own way and with his people, he would be supportive and would maybe go after your opponent.
So he screwed you
The other option is that he would be at your throat all the time. And so the calculation was made that it's better to have him on the team and whatever baggage that brings with us.
Or at least muzzled, yeah.
To some degree, to whatever degree you can muzzle him.
Yeah.
It was a very awkward moment for sure for those of us that were there observing it. It was awkward for Mitt. And, even then I used to tell people before all of this started how hilarious it was backstage because we had just won the Florida primary and had this massive primary night with more press than we had ever encountered on the campaign at that point in time. I mean, hundreds of cameras in the back of that ballroom. And we show up at this hotel in Las Vegas, and we're backstage, and all Donald Trump can talk about is how this is the biggest event that we've had so far. Isn't it the biggest? Isn't it the biggest?
And he was
on and on.
And you guys were all like, yes, Mr. Trump.
And finally I said, yes, Mr. Trump, yours is the biggest.
And we're back, and joining us now is Sam Stein, or Slammy Sammy as he known. How are you tonight?
I am not known as that.
You're not known as that. Okay, so we wanted to talk about this exciting new World War III scenario that occurred tonight at the GOP debate. Chris Christie asked the extent to which he would enforce a no-fly zone over Syria. Would it include shooting down Russian planes? And he said, absolutely, it would include that. And I was kind of like, so that's how we're all going to die. He's going to shoot down a Russian plane.
He was also following John Kasich saying it was time to punch Russia in the nose.
If only I had another choice than to not take us to war with Russia.
Yeah.
Chris Christie. Epitaphs of great humans. Okay, so he's done and dusted, right, as far as being in this presidential race, correct?
No.
Because you can't just say, I'll take us to war with Russia for an almost arbitrary reason and be elected president, correct?
You could say crazier things than that, like I will ban all Muslims from coming into this country.
Okay, but he's done and dusted too, correct?
I think I suppose I'm trying to make intellectual consistency out of this. If you have a no-fly zone, that is the policy, but in the real world, that is completely batshit nuts. And obviously, we don't want a commander-in-chief who would stick to a policy in which, knee-jerk, you would have to start World War III with Russia because you are disputing a small region of Syria. That's just crazy. But I think that's sort of the pressures of this debate and campaign is to just act like you're the toughest dude on stage. And it's silly. I mean, no one actually thinks that in a hypothetical Christie administration that we're going to do that, but he has to talk tough like it.
Chris Christie not only wants to go to World War III with Russia, he's also really bored with congressional subcommittees.
Yeah. All these people trying to pass legislation to do stuff. What's that all about, man?
Just make decisions.
It's going to be really frustrating when he's in the Oval Office and he needs to figure out how to get legislation. He's like, God damn it, I was a former federal prosecutor in New Jersey. Just get it done.
Oh, yes.
Was he a federal prosecutor?
Yes.
I didn't hear that in the debate. Yeah.
Chris Christie, he keeps claiming to have been a prosecutor. Absolutely true.
It's true, yes. He reminded us of that a few times.
PolitiFact.
Marco Rubio's dad. Bartender, apparently. Bartender. Well, there was a maid, I guess. I don't know.
Everyone's got to have their little biographical tidbit that they remind people of all the time.
All right, so who are the better of the conflicts tonight? We were talking about Rubio versus Cruz.
Yeah.
Probably ended up being the hotter conflict, even though we went into it thinking that CNN was going to pit Trump and Cruz against each other.
Yeah, I think you're right. That was sort of the hot conflict, and it was about immigration, or it ended up being about immigration. It didn't start that way. But I step back and I think about how we reacted to all the previous debates, and we're like, well, so and so did pretty well, and Trump really did poorly. And then our instantaneous conventional wisdom ended up being sort of it didn't affect the calculus or the trajectory of the race in any sense that you would expect. And so I just look at this debate and I say, well, there are some openings that were created by these back and forths, but I didn't see anything that would submarine someone. I didn't see anything that would elevate someone necessarily. I think the race kind of continues on a trajectory that we generally assumed it would continue on. And I think now we see sort of the main frictions here. One is Cruz-Rubio, and the other is, as you hinted, Trump-Cruz. And whether there will be any great breaks, I don't think we should expect that.
I felt like I went into the debate thinking, okay, this matters mostly for the Iowa standings. Trump's way up in the national polls.
Yeah.
The question is what happens in Iowa and whether that will affect the national polls afterwards. And so you look at the candidate who's been surging in Iowa, it's Ted Cruz. To me, his weakest moment tonight was when he got pinned down on carpet bombing and made clear that while he was calling it carpet bombing, he wasn't actually in favor of carpet bombing.
Carpet bombing was essentially Obama's drone policy, which is get them where they are, do it pretty quick and mercilessly, and then get out. That's it. And it gets back to this point that we've written about here at HuffPost a bunch, which is basically everyone has the same strategy. You can deck it up in different rhetorical, bells and whistles, but it's the same.
So much conversation about ISIS tonight, and CNN began with this intention of pinning people down and actually getting to specific policies. How would you fight ISIS? And I kind of felt like at the outset when they announced that intention, saying, I have bad news for you. Between all these Republicans and frankly the Democrats too, there really isn't a lot of breadth of ideas. There is airstrikes, how many airstrikes, and who leads the airstrikes. Obviously, Republicans are very bent out of shape that we're not doing more airstrikes. We are airstriking quite effectively. If you ask anyone who's been fighting on the ground with the Kurdish Peshmerga, they'll tell you the airstrikes have made a big difference. They would like America to lead in the airstrikes. There's also a lot of questions about whether we put ground troops in Iraq or in Syria. If so, how many? If so, how's their function? Now, a lot of people have noted that to put American ground troops in Iraq would be sort of a fulfillment of ISIS's self-conception and their mythology, and it would be a big recruiting drive, but a big incitement to ISIS recruits who are finally getting the Americans here, as opposed to it being a miserable slog of being bombed all the time by Americans. But just to defend the notion of ground troops, surely there is a significant upgrade in quality if American soldiers are fighting. Correct?
Okay, sure.
So isn't that an argument in and of itself? I think Lindsey Graham said tonight that they can't preach further mythology if they're all dead.
The problem with the ground troops argument is this, is that the people who are proposing ground troops, like Lindsey Graham, are proposing 10,000 troops for Iraq, 10,000 troops for Syria, 20,000 total. Okay, during the surge, we had 150,000 American troops in Iraq alone, with allied forces joining us, with the Sunni awakening happening. That's a lot of people, and the problem today is much bigger, much more entrenched, and much more widespread.
I think the problem is a little bit different than that, to be honest with you. And this happens to be the administration's position, so I'm reflecting my reporting on that, which is the problem with inserting ground troops into this region is the freeloader problem, which is that if on the one hand you want to convince all these Sunni states to sacrifice their own troops, build their own armies, conquer this problem themselves, which would be a much more comprehensive solution. On the other hand, you can't then put your own troops out there because they will essentially say, okay, great, you deal with this. Thank you very much. We're going to offload our problems to you. Your troops are more effective anyway, so Godspeed.
Sam, really quick, did you hear anyone on the stage tonight who you felt had the wherewithal to conjure up support from a Sunni proxy group in Iraq?
No, but that's the problem that faces even Obama, right? Which is, it's one thing to say, yes, I will talk to the Saudis, I will talk to the Jordanians, I will work with the Kurds, and I will tell them, you have to do this. Oh, okay, and if they say no?
Turkey's basically been saying no for like 4 years.
Correct, and that's because there's the whole conflict with the Kurds, and so there's a myriad of complicating factors here that no one wants to acknowledge as part of this.
All right, we are going to kick it back to another clip from the most recent Drinking and Talking with this man right here. We'll be right back as soon as that's over.
Well, I I've taken you all to many watch parties.
In your estimation to this point, what has been the most eyebrow-raising moment of this Republican primary? It doesn't have to be Trump-related because I think we're all going to choose.
Does anybody
Trump.
not think it was
I think,
yesterday?
I think there might be one
exactly.
between when we
No,
were
no, I
taping
have
this
one.
and when this goes up. There may be something new.
Sure. But to this point, to
That's it, yeah.
Tuesday, December 8th, what has been? I'll start because it's not Trump-related. I thought when Ben Carson talked about the pyramids being grain storage entities, did I miss
Aw, that just
he's
feels
got
like
a
kicking a
bunch of-
puppy.
this? Oh, come on! That wasn't.
Yeah,
oh my God! Maybe I don't know. I
Actually,
a puppy.
That's not
I'm
wrong.
going to
That
defend
wasn't-
Ben Carson on
On the
this.
grain stuff?
I actually am, which is
Am I
not to say
taking-
that I don't think it's true, but that was actually sort of a quasi-common belief in the Middle Ages that that's what they were for because it matches up with the Bible story. Now I'm not.
Okay,
saying
yeah,
that, like,
I
I mean,
think
it's
that's my point.
subsequently been disproven. Or I should say there isn't any hard evidence for it, but it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I would think he
President
might have
Oh, I love
stumbled
that
upon
moment.
that in all of his education.
I love that
No.
moment. I love that moment so
That is
much.
so sweet, though.
All right, what?
I tried.
Yeah, fair enough.
Me?
Yeah, sure. Why
Or
not?
do I get to play like closer here? It's a Trump moment, but
Fair
it's actually
enough.
to me it's a women's moment, and that is how easy it was for Carly to turn that around,
Yeah.
and how everybody ought to take a lesson from that moment. She rocked that moment because she tied it into every woman, and I think that was a moment more about women than it was about Trump. So. Eyebrow raising.
Not eyebrow raising, but
provided you have
inspirational,
Botox.
maybe, yeah.
No Botox.
I have another one that was also a woman moment and was a Trump moment. And I do, for the record, think that he is a major sexist, misogynist pig. So let's just...
What tipped you off?
So let's just leave that on the table. But when he mentioned Megyn Kelly...
Oh, yeah.
And the blood coming out of her
Oh, my
eyes
God.
or whatever...
She starts asking me all sorts of ridiculous questions, and you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
My natural reaction was to want to get on Twitter and Facebook and defend her. And, I reached out to my friend Dana Perino, who's very close with Megyn, and said, my gut is to want to do this, but I think she probably just wants this to go away. Mm-hmm. Because as a woman, the notion that you could be as accomplished and smart and professional as Megyn Kelly is, and to have your professional career reduced to your menstrual cycle is so infuriating and offensive to me that I literally see red over it. And the idea that he didn't pay a much bigger price, the idea that Roger Ailes ever allowed him back on Fox Network after being that personally insulting to one of his anchors is as offensive to me as the fact that Trump uttered it.
I think from months back to November and December last year, the sort of elephant in this race was Jeb Bush. Certainly at the Wall Street Journal, we pay a lot of attention to Jeb Bush.
Sure.
A lot of his donors are our readers with $12 for 12 weeks. You can sign up.
Fair enough, Reed.
The
You
moment,
got your plug-in, damn
the
it.
moment when Jeb threw a punch at Rubio in the Colorado debate and just got flattened by Rubio's response.
The only reason why you're doing it now is because we're running for the same position and someone has convinced you that attacking me is going to help you.
In that moment, it felt like Jeb was finished.
You're the last to go. Hold on, before you go, just note, I host the show, I provided you alcohol. Just back me up on the Ben Carson pyramid as the craziest moment. Don't let me down.
Let him have his own moment.
Don't let me down.
I would say honestly that the ladies chose the two things.
Oh, you let me down.
I probably shouldn't, but why not? I'll just pile on to Trump again. It's sort of in a similar vein in terms of being full metal chauvinist. When Trump signed that lady's boob, and it was kind of amazing.
I had blocked that out, Mark, but thank you for bringing it screaming back to
For
me.
a second,
It was the defining moment.
For a second there, I just kind of imagined what it would be like if Gene Simmons ran for president. And it was kind of funny because if you know anything about Gene
And you
Simmons, they
thought that would
basically
be-
share the same politics.
You thought that would be more respectable?
Yeah, but for a second there, it would have made a little more sense and would have been a little more fun if we had Gene Simmons instead of Trump. But that thought quickly dissipated, and I was left with the fact that modern politics had degenerated to the fact that Donald Trump had signed some lady's boob, and there we are.
Let's cut it there.
Now joined by Lauren Weber. And Zach Carter.
We're back.
Okay,
I was just talking about how I was going to get some gin when this was over. In case you missed that hot mic moment.
Honestly, we could have used it during.
Yeah. This was rough tonight.
I'm gratified to know you're into gin now because I don't believe you drank it until my wife brought that bottle over to your house.
Yeah, and I was going to bring
Clearly
it
you're a
back, but
convert.
then I
The whole
didn't.
thing.
Yeah.
So,
And now we know.
and that's the incredibly true story about how Zach got into gin.
Welcome to a HuffPost live stream.
But more importantly, tonight's debate, I want to ask. It's unlikely because of the way the media keeps coddling these guys. But if we had to winnow this debate further down, who would go? Who would leave? And I ask you to try to divorce it from perhaps what you personally thought of their responses tonight.
Well, the entire undercard debate team needs to go.
Right. Okay.
Agreed.
We're already cutting those
yeah.
for. I mean, I would say that Fiorina needs to go. I felt like she didn't really contribute much of anything tonight.
I would agree with that. Zach, what do you think?
Fiorina, Kasich, Christie, Jeb. Throw
Wow.
them all out.
I think
You would
Rand.
keep
I think
Rand
Rand
Paul.
is going to go over Jeb.
After I specifically asked you to divorce it from your own personal
I mean,
feelings.
Yeah, I know.
jeez.
It would make it more interesting though if there was still somebody who disagreed with these guys on foreign policy being in the debate.
It's
So
just-
I don't care.
that's-
He has way less of a
All
point.
right, so I'll take all 5 of them, sure. So that would mean I think the people, oh
The
my God,
people
the people
left.
who deserve to be on stage, I can't believe I'm saying this, are Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and
Ben Carson.
Carson.
Ben
Ben
Carson.
I have a feeling that maybe in a couple weeks you won't have the need to worry about Ben Carson.
I think Ben Carson is a sinking ship.
Tonight, Ben Carson was perhaps the weirdest he's ever been.
I mean, that's hard to do.
Wow.
I think tonight he decided his strategy was to come at every question with an interesting metaphor that didn't actually contain a lot of substance. And so you got these weird like trail off ideas about
Giving you oxygen on an airplane really is the one I keep coming back to.
yeah, it's the one we all keep coming back to.
That one was rough. He was going to defeat ISIS
Who
because
is the flight attendant in this metaphor
when
of
your
America?
plane is going down, you make sure that you put your oxygen mask on first before you help the person next to you. And it's like I was like, wait, in this
There's a lot of
metaphor,
killing kids
everybody's
in his
about to die in
answers.
this metaphor. The plane's going to crash. If you're doing the mask, you're probably going to die.
But I also have to say the weirdest thing I heard tonight, the weirdest thing, was Donald Trump talking about shutting the internet down, about how ISIS was on our
Katie Couric
internet.
in whatever year that was that she said, "What is the internet?" That was Donald Trump
that
tonight.
was he had no idea what the internet.
Has he ever been online?
No, we're going to shut down their internet in Syria, not our internet over here.
No, he came back and said that. He didn't say that at the beginning. Clearly,
even that
someone
doesn't
said
make
to
sense.
him, like off stage, like, "Dude, do you know what the internet is?"
We're going to get our most brilliant guys to stop them from infiltrating our internet.
We're just going to shut down pieces of the internet.
And then he
So he
said,
figured
let's
out
not call them
our internet.
masterminds, but let's call them people who indoctrinate people super effectively over the internet. What? I didn't understand that at all.
I mean,
Chris Christie also wasn't very good on the internet when he was brought into the discussion about cyber war. He was asked, "You've promised cyber war like you've never seen. What does that mean?" I wasn't really able to follow him. I think he literally said he would assign people to find embarrassing stuff about Chinese people and publish it in the media.
He also called
Be
for
like,
World War
"See?
III with Russia. So, Chris Christie had a great,
See,
interesting
look
debate.
at all these Chinese dick pics. You like that, China? And I was like, that's going to help us with what exactly? I didn't quite understand it. But tonight was perhaps the weirdest question about answer about the internet that I've seen since
Where was
the
Al
internet
Gore?
was invented.
Could have used some Al Gore explainers up there.
We used a lot of explainers.
It was interesting to me that this was a foreign policy debate. There was just a major international agreement that went down in Paris over climate change.
Yep.
Big international agreement. This has consequences for how the United States relates to a lot of its allies and
It's
also
economic consequences.
and also its enemies.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. Zero questions.
Zero questions.
Donald Trump brought it up, but he didn't. I mean, it was not asked as a question.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think watching this debate, I felt like more so than in prior debates, the moderation, like they kept it under control. It wasn't like CNBC where things just got totally out of hand.
I thought the questions were terrible.
But the
though.
questions were just not good. It was just be afraid, be very, very afraid for 4.5 hours.
They literally phrased a question: "Are you okay with killing children?" What was that question? Ben
Anyway.
Carson,
And they
can
were,
you,
and they were okay.
Can
They
you
were okay
kill
with it.
children?
Yeah.
What?
Folks, we have assurances this will be the last GOP debate of the year. This Saturday,
God
the
bless us all.
Democrats will meet for their own debate. We will not be live streaming it because we've heard loud and clear from you, our viewers at home, that you don't want to do anything Saturday involving debates. You're going to watch football, and that's cool.
We get that.
Our live blog will be up and running that night. We'll be covering it. We'll be back after the new year for whatever the debates have in whole out there in the future for us. For all of us here, for Zach, for Lauren, for our Natural Light team. We will see you after the new year. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all that shenanigans.